Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see everybody. Lovely day out.
Yep.
So we were listening to The Sound of Silence and the prelude. The historical silence of a limited written record for Native Americans allowed Anglo culture to step into the void and claim to speak for their interpreters, as their interpreters. Silence is a major value in Native American culture, a symbol of peace and serenity. But the result of this tradition was a limited written record that others used to speak for them. This sound of silence in a colonial context relates to the absence of Native Americans' own authentic voice in the historical record, which needs to be actively reclaimed through modern Native American literature. So we all know the story of Thanksgiving, right? First Thanksgiving was a harvest celebration where pilgrims and some friendly members of an unidentified Indian tribe came together to eat and give thanks. This story is a heartwarming kumbaya moment. But the problem with this story is it's a story. It's not history. So what's the truth? According to the Smithsonian, they've only found two brief primary sources written by the white settlers. And it appears that they did not make as big a deal about this celebration as we do. They didn't even know the exact date of when it occurred. Well, the Mayflower did bring settlers from England to land which they colonized and renamed Plymouth. In 1621, those pilgrims did hold a 3-day feast, which was attended by members of the Wampanoag tribe. However, pilgrims typically celebrated Thanksgivings in their traditional way of fasting and praying, not feasting. This first Thanksgiving, a food and celebration, was known as a rejoicing. In one document, Europeans did not invite the Native Americans to their feast. The leader of the Wampanoag tribe had declared an alliance with the settlers, much like NATO. And 90 members of the tribe were showing up to honor a mutual defense pact. They'd heard the pilgrims shooting their guns. This was a celebration. And they thought that they were in combat. After some talk, they decided to spend 3 days together and join the feast. But this type of coming together did not become a warm, fuzzy tradition. The indigenous people's experience has been entirely left out of the history. Native American, should I speak louder?
I can't hear you. That's a little.
Yeah, you can sit
I'm gonna
here.
sit. It's okay. I'm good. Native American.
The indigenous, okay. So the Native Americans had been on the land for centuries, and their story far predates this feast. When Europeans began coming to what's now the United States, they carried foreign illnesses which killed Native people at exceedingly high rates. That then made it easier for the coloners to take over their lands. The Thanksgiving story suggests that the Native people's history doesn't begin until the Europeans arrived. But people had been in the Americas for at least 12,000 years. And having history start with the English is a way of dismissing the truth of the Native American history. The Wampanoag and neighboring Native nations were interacting with European explorers, traders, and enslavers for nearly 100 years before English settlers arrived in 1620. After careful observation, negotiations, and interactions, the Wampanoag decided to assist the English settlers. However, their interactions had much more to do with political alliances and diplomacy rather than a budding friendship. Cooperation and peace were short-lived, and the Pilgrims' destruction of Native American culture, homelands, and peoples became violent and widespread. In 1637, for instance, they waged war against the Pequot Native Americans with such virulence that even the indigenous peoples who supported the Puritans in this conflict were stunned by the colonists' inclination to kill women, children, and other non-combatants indiscriminately. The atrocities against Native Americans did not end with diseases or massacres. So seeing people celebrating the positive myth of Thanksgiving can be very painful for Indigenous people. The myth of the first Thanksgiving was actually started in the mid-1800s. Stereotypical images of pilgrims and Indians celebrating the first Thanksgiving became part of the national nostalgia. In 1863, President Lincoln declared a national Thanksgiving in November to celebrate gratitude and unity amidst the turmoil of the Civil War. In the decades that followed, the first Thanksgiving myth and the national holiday evolved into a foundational national story. It gained momentum in the late 19th century, when there was an enormous amount of anxiety and agitation over immigration. The white Protestant population of the United States was unhappy about the influx of European Catholics and Jews and wanted to assert its cultural authority. Sound familiar?
No.
For Native Americans, rather than this being the first Thanksgiving, harvest ceremonies and festivals had been an integral part of Wampanoag culture for thousands of years. The Wampanoag practiced daily and seasonal traditions of giving thanks long before the encounter with English settlers and the formation of Thanksgiving as a national holiday. Giving thanks is a long-standing central tradition among Indigenous people. To the original people of this continent, each day is a day of thanksgiving to the Creator. However, Thanksgiving Day is a reminder of the genocide of millions of Native people, the theft of Native lands, and the relentless assault on Native culture. Many Native Americans have marked Thanksgiving Day as a day of mourning for 48 years. Participants in National Day of Mourning honor Native ancestors and the struggles of Native peoples to survive. It's a day of remembrance and spiritual connection, as well as a protest of the racism and oppression which Native Americans continue to experience. It's important for Americans to understand why Native Americans do not see Thanksgiving as a reason for celebration, and why it is instead for them a reason for mourning. But Americans must be willing to study history instead of accepting as history sanitized founding myths that are designed to confirm nationalism and end up perpetuating racist attitudes. For example, we think today's What's going on today is something new, but it has a long history. Slavery was good. You didn't know that? The slaves learned trades. And so the history.
On the balance sheet of the,
Excuse me?
on the balance sheet, they had value.
Yes, they had value. Yes, they had value.
So,
So we should be learning about the Native American perspective rather than the nonsense that Native people willingly handed off their country to the invaders. And by the way, the myth is that Native Americans did not own land, but they did own community land, and they knew where their property ended. And when the colonizers came and gave them money for their land, they thought that they were buying into the Wampanoag land, not that they were stealing it from under them. It does damage to how our Native countrymen and women feel as part of this country. It makes white Americans a lot less reflective about where their privilege comes from, and it makes us a lot less critical as a country when it comes to questioning the rationales that leaders give us to act aggressively against foreign others. Well, there are always two sides to a story, and history must include all perspectives, from the people who experience the event, not only the writers of the history. Unfortunately, when it comes to the history of Thanksgiving, generations of Americans have been taught a one-sided history in their homes and schools. The dominant cultural and historical story has been told from the perspective of the European colonists. But Thanksgiving is a complex holiday that all Americans should approach with greater sensitivity. Every year in the news and social media, there's little coverage of the fact that November is Native American Heritage Month, or that the day after Thanksgiving, known as Black Friday, is also Native American Heritage Day. Most children are only taught this brief snapshot in American history, which leaves a frozen memory of peace and generosity. However, in a short time after these Thanksgiving events, circumstances and relationships between the European settlers and the Native American tribes drastically changed. While some Native Americans have chosen to reject the Thanksgiving holiday entirely, many embrace the positive messages of the day and choose to put aside thoughts about its complex history. Thanksgiving is simply a chance to appreciate the good things in life, like family, community, and the riches of the land. Long before settlers arrived, Native tribes celebrated the autumn harvest and the gift of Mother Earth's abundance. Native American spirituality traditionally emphasizes gratitude for creation, care for the environment, and recognition of the human need for communion with nature and others. I think a much better perspective than what we've been given. Thanksgiving as a holiday originates from the Native American philosophy of giving without expecting anything in return. In the first celebration of this holiday, the Wampanoag tribe provided not only the food for the feast, but also the teachings of agriculture and hunting. Now, regardless of the day's complicated origin, many Native Americans will have gathered with friends and family and used the day to eat good food. Many of the classic Thanksgiving dishes are inspired by indigenous foods, and they give thanks. Stephen Peters, a Wampanoag tribe spokesman, was asked about his views on Thanksgiving and the fact that most people still gather to eat turkey and give thanks. He said, quote, "I think it's great. My ancestors had 4 harvest festivals throughout the year. Gathering with family, enjoying our company, sharing our blessings, and giving thanks for all that we have is a good thing. I say have more Thanksgiving events throughout the year. I also ask that you take a moment on that day to remember what happened to my people and the history as it was recorded, and not the narrative that we had been given in the history books. So as we gather this Thanksgiving, we wish the hearts of all people, native and non-native, are filled with hope and healing. Together, let's pledge to dismantle the physical, economic, educational, psychological, and spiritual barriers that divide us.
Well, we'll have another view of harvest and food. Demeter is the Greek goddess of agriculture, harvest, and fertility. Wheat and barley are the crops that were dominant in the ancient belief. Demeter is also associated with the sacred law of life and the cycle of the seasons. Her meaning is deeply tied to the earth's bounty and the sustenance of life. Demeter's grief over the abduction of her daughter Persephone by Hades, the god of the underworld, while she was picking a narcissus planted by the goddess Gaia, explains the seasons. When Persephone stooped to pick the narcissus, the ground beneath her began to quake, and a gaping crack appeared and widened. Hades and his chariot drawn by black horses emerged and charged toward Persephone. Before she could scream, Hades grabbed her and took her down with him to the land of the dead. When Demeter returned to look for her daughter, she cursed the nymphs who were watching over her daughter, and she cursed them by giving them plumed bodies, scaly feet, and wings.
Arlene, they can't see your face.
Thank you. They would no longer be known as nymphs of the sea, but henceforth they would be known as sirens. When Persephone's belt was found by Demeter in the river Cian, a river formed by Persephone's tears, Demeter knew that something dreadful had happened to her daughter. She roamed the earth, driven mad by her daughter's disappearance. She neglected her duties to tend the earth, and plants, wheat, and animals died. Famine ravaged the earth. Zeus heard the cries of mortals, and he sent the god Hermes to retrieve Persephone, who in the meantime had fallen in love with Hades, who had beautiful gardens constructed for her. He treated her with love and respect. Persephone saw a side of Hades she had never seen before, and she embraced her new home, helping the spirits of the deceased to cross over. Although Persephone loved Hades, she missed and loved her mother too. Hades was terrified that Persephone would leave him, so he gifted her with 6 pomegranate seeds to eat, which she did. In Greek mythology, it was believed if one ate food given to them by their captor, they would always return. This sounds like the Stockholm syndrome that we hear about today, that when, usually it's a girl or a woman is abducted, she becomes attached to her captor and wants to stay with her captor. Zeus decided that Persephone would spend half the year on Mount Olympus with her mother and half the year with Hades in the underworld. Persephone's time with Hades caused the autumn and winter, and the plants died. The time with her mother brought spring and summer, and new growth emerged. Demeter's name is often interpreted as Earth Mother since her domain extends to general fertility, life, and the earth itself. Demeter's Roman equivalent is Circe's, a name from which the word cereal is derived. Demeter is often depicted with a sheaf of wheat and a cornucopia. She taught mortals how to grow crops and make bread. Today, the cornucopia is associated with Thanksgiving and plentifulness. So here we are with today's traditions. Thanksgiving is a U.S. American custom, and as Debbie has told us, very different from what we were taught in school. I know in the 1950s, I was taught the very U.S. Americanized story, which was not true. And at the time, I believed it. I no longer believe it, happy to say. Traditions vary today by both ethnicities and personal preferences. Most traditions today include a special meal. African Americans might have a table filled with Cajun turkey wings, baked mac and cheese, candied sweet potatoes, cornbread
Oh, that's
stuffing.
enough.
We're just starting to get hungry. Cornbread stuffing for the turkey, collard greens, green beans, and cranberry sauce. Culinary African American artist Nia Lee bakes a carrot cake that celebrates the legacy of LGBTQ plus martyred activist trans woman Marsha P. Johnson. And the cake takes its name from a phrase by Johnson, "Pay it no mind." One of my identities is Italian American. My nana always served antipasto with mozzarella, gorgonzola, fontina, and assaggio cheeses, prosciutto, Genoa salami, capicola, black and green olives, roasted red peppers, sun-dried tomatoes, marinated mushrooms, anchovies, and sardines. Bread and breadsticks were on the table with clementines and red and green grapes. Tortellini soup followed, then homemade cheese ravioli. The turkey stuffed with bread, sausages, and seasonings was carved. For dessert, there were cannoli and Nana's famous puffy cookies with white icing and colored sprinkles, which we make today and are known as Nana cookies. My German relatives also had a full table.
Oh, no.
With sauerbraten, which is pot roast, marinated for several days in vinegar, water, and spices. Potato balls, freshly made red cabbage, spätzle, a homemade noodle dish, and there was turkey with a sausage stuffing. Germans love wurst, so there were also a variety of wursts and pumpernickel bread. Apple strudel was typically the dessert. Some families might also have Black Forest chocolate cake. I have been fortunate to have a Thanksgiving dinner every year of my life. Today, I make a very traditional U.S. American dinner. Cranberry bread, a celery and olive plate, not my Nana's antipasto, turkey with bread stuffing, candied sweet potatoes made by Donna. Yes, she can cook. Asparagus, broccoli, mashed white potatoes, and mushroom gravy. We enjoy wines, lots of it, and soft drinks for libations. For dessert, there was apple pie, pumpkin pie, vegan whoopie pies made by my vegan daughter Nadine, ice cream, and grapes. Latin Americans have also adopted Thanksgiving as a traditional holiday. My former neighbor Maria, who is from Colombia, sent me a photo of her Thanksgiving table this year. She had turkey, ham, deviled eggs, fried green plantains, sweet potatoes, rice, dinner rolls, and a large lettuce and tomato salad. My Jewish and Mauritian friends, John and Vincent, dined out in New York City with their brother, enjoying a traditional turkey dinner at a high-end restaurant. Chinese restaurants are the choice of some people who forego the traditional turkey dinner. Some families send out for dinner. Serving in food kitchens is an option that some people choose for Thanksgiving. My brother and sister-in-law in Port St. Lucie, Florida, served dinner to the hungry last year. But this year, the rules for servers became stringent, and they didn't qualify. So they had friends over for dinner on Thanksgiving Eve. The common denominator for most folks is food, family, and friends. Perhaps Demeter and Persephone make this possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.